Welcome back, everyone, to another exciting episode of the Functional Longevity Podcast, where we give you insight on how to get fit, feel younger, and live better. I'm your host, Chris Border, best-selling author and owner of Y.E.S Fitness. And let me first thank you for taking time from your busy day to listen to what I have to say. I don't take that lightly, so I hope you find this information helpful and informative. Before we get started, let me thank our sponsor, Y.E.S Fitness. Most people lose the ability to enjoy life as they age. At Y.E.S Fitness, we help people age 40 plus get fit so we can live longer and enjoy those extra years doing the things they love to do. Some quick housekeeping here. If you'd like to get a timestamp or a transcript of today's broadcast, head on over to yesfitnessct.com. Scroll across the top. Do you see podcasts? Click on that button. It will give you access to any one of our now 310 episodes. You can also get this broadcast wherever podcasts can be found. Excuse me. Exposing the 4 new myths associated with intermittent fasting. In today's broadcast, we're diving into a topic that's been making waves for quite some time, intermittent fasting. Whether you're new to the concept or a seasoned faster, you've probably heard a lot of conflicting information. So we're here to clear the air. In this episode, we'll be breaking down the research from University of Illinois. It was recently published in Nature Reviews Endocrinology. These researchers took a hard look at intermittent fasting and debunked some of the most persistent myths that have been floating around. Let's get into it. I hear intermittent fasting all the time at the gym. Is it good? Is it not good? Is this real? Is that real? So I thought I would just take a few minutes and try to help define some of these things for us and uncover some of the myths. So first thing, what exactly is intermittent fasting? There are 2 main types that people follow. Number 1 is an alternating day fasting, where you alternate between days of eating very few calories and days of eating freely or at maintenance. The second one is time-restricted eating, something that I've done often, where you eat during a specific window of 4 to 10 hours each day or fast for the remaining hours. I will typically maybe skip breakfast sometimes at my morning snack just to extend the period of time that I've fasted from the previous dinner and then shorten the amount of time that I'm actually intaking some calories. I don't do it often. When I do it, I typically will do it on a Tuesday and a Thursday just to mix things up because we know the metabolism gets very used to what we do. So why is intermittent fasting so popular? Number 1, it's simplicity and flexibility. Intermittent fasting focuses on when you eat rather than what you eat, making it easier to follow. With different methods of availability, it is easily fit into various lifestyles. So we're not telling you foods to eat or not eat necessarily. We're really just trying to change the time frame that you're eating it in. Number 2, for weight loss, is limiting eating windows naturally reduces calorie intake, leading to a weight loss without the need for strict dieting. 3, it can do social influence. The rise of social media and health influencers promoting intermittent fasting has made it a trendy and accessible choice for many. So some of the key benefits of intermittent fasting. Just a moment, we talk about weight loss and fat loss. It helps reduce weight and fat by limiting the amount of time you eat, which can create a caloric deficit. Doesn't have to necessarily do that because if you're overeating, you're overeating. But it can do that simply by reduce the amount of times you eat. There is some metabolic health to it. Intermittent fasting improves blood sugar levels, insulin sensitivity, and cholesterol, reducing the risk of type 2 diabetes and heart disease. Number 3, we have some brain health. It may support cognitive function and brain health by increasing the production of brain-derived neurotropic factors, the BDNF, which is linked to improved memory and reduced risk of neurodegenerative diseases. For longevity, we've talked about it before, fasting triggers autophagy, a process that cleans out damaged cells, potentially slowing down aging and reducing the risk of age-related diseases. Number 5, reduced inflammation. It can lower inflammation by markers in the body, contributing to overall better health. Now, despite its popularity, intermittent fasting has been surrounded by myths. The good news is, this recent study from the University of Illinois sets the record straight. And we're going to dive into each of those myths right now. We're going to take a look at 4. So the first myth of intermittent fasting is it leads to poor diet. One of the biggest concerns out there is that intermittent fasting can or could lead to poor dietary habits. You know, the idea that fasting might make you crave junk food or neglect important nutrients. But here's what the research shows. Your intake of sugar, saturated fats, cholesterol, fiber, sodium, and caffeine doesn't change when you fast compared to before. The percentage of calories you get from carbs, proteins, or fats, they too stay consistent. So let's dive a little bit deeper into this. A study published in Obesity Reviews showed that people who participated or who practiced intermittent fasting reported improved dietary quality, particularly when following time-restricted eating. They tend to eat more nutrient-based foods during their eating windows, possibly because they are more mindful of what they're consuming, knowing they have limited time to eat. This finding counters the idea that fasting leads to poor food choices. Furthermore, we have another study here from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. And they found that people who fasted did not increase their intake of junk food or high-calorie snacks after the fasting period. Instead, they maintained a balanced diet, suggesting that intermittent fasting doesn't compromise the quality of the foods that we eat. Number 2, intermittent fasting causes eating disorders. Another myth here is that fasting might trigger eating disorders, especially in those who are already at risk. The researchers were very clear on this one. Intermittent fasting doesn't cause eating disorders. But, and this is a big but, if someone has a history of eating disorders, this isn't an appropriate for them. It's not appropriate for someone who has a history of eating disorders. So let's back up a little bit here with some research. A systematic review published in Eating Behaviors looked at various studies on intermittent fasting and eating disorders. It concluded that while fasting doesn't cause eating disorders, it should be approached with caution, particularly in populations vulnerable to such cautions. Or I should say such conditions, pardon me. None of these studies showed a direct link between fasting and the onset of eating disorders in healthy individuals. However, the researchers did emphasize the importance of screening for history of eating disorders before starting an intermittent fasting regimen. And for those working with adolescents, particularly those struggling with obesity, it is critical to monitor them closely, as this group has a higher risk of developing disorders eating patterns. Number 3, intermittent fasting causes excessive loss of lean muscle mass. So let's talk about muscle. Some folks believe that intermittent fasting might cause you to lose more muscle mass compared to other diets. But the truth is, the amount of muscle loss is the same, whether you're fasting or following a different weight loss plan. Then here comes some research, and there's a study published in Journal of Transitional Medicine that examined muscle loss in individuals who were on an intermittent fasting diet compared to those on a continuous calorie restriction diet. The results were fascinating. Both groups lost a similar amount of weight, but there was no significant difference in the loss of lean muscle mass between them. This indicates that fasting doesn't uniquely threaten muscle preservation. Moreover, adding resistance training to your routine and ensuring adequate protein intake can further protect your muscle mass. So, according to a study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, those who combined intermittent fasting with resistance training not only maintained their lean muscle, but also saw improvement in muscle strength and endurance. So, if you're worried about muscle loss, consider hitting the weights and to focus on protein-rich foods during your eating window. Always concerned with that. Anyone who listens to this podcast knows we want to maintain our muscle mass. So make sure we're lifting weights and make sure we have a protein-rich diet if we're dieting of any sort. And the fourth one is intermittent fasting affects sex hormones. This last myth we're busting today is that intermittent fasting can mess with your hormones, specifically sex hormones like estrogen and testosterone. Concerns about futility and libido have been floating around, but the researchers found that no impact on these hormones from fasting. A study in obesity investigated the effects of intermittent fasting on reproductive hormones in both men and women. The results? No significant changes in levels of testosterone, estrogen, or other sex hormones were observed. These findings aligned with other studies that showed intermittent fasting does not negatively impact fertility and sexual function. In fact, some research suggests that fasting could have potential benefits for reproductive health. A study in cell metabolism found that intermittent fasting improved the metabolic health of participants, which could in turn support overall hormonal balance. So while these myths might suggest otherwise, the science tells us that fasting doesn't throw your hormones out of whack. So the bottom line here is Krista Varady, the lead author of this study, has been researching intermittent fasting for over 20 years. In her take, most of the myths out there are based on personal opinions, not science. And then everything we speak about here is about science. We want to make sure we have science backing it up. Research is what is important. And that what's really need to remember is when it comes to our health, it's science that matters. But remember, before you make any changes to your routine, remember that this is a podcast. It's not a substitute professional medical advice. Always check with your medical health care provider and before starting any new diet or wellness plan. So there we have it, folks. The 4 myths about intermittent fasting that have officially been debunked by research. So if you found this episode helpful, make sure you subscribe and leave a review. Share it with your friends. If you have any questions or topics that you want us to cover for future episodes, just drop us a line. Until next time, stay healthy, stay informed, and keep questioning everything. And we'll see you again next week with more information on how to get fit, feel younger, and live better. Thanks for watching.